When breaking down any piece of poultry, including a chicken, duck, turkey, doesn't matter. You're always going to start by cutting away those fatty flaps at the opening of the chicken or poultry's cavity. Going to get it nice and clean because that's going to affect it when you go and detach the legs. Now, next, you're going to take out the wishbone, and this is a step that I generally skip, but it's something that you need to understand. And the wishbone is right there up front. It's basically the same thing as the human's collarbone, and you take it out by just scraping your blade along that bone on the inside. And you get your fingers in there and you kind of release it. And number one, it's a time-consuming process. And number two, it also very much dulls the blade of your knife because all you're doing is scraping it along those bones. Now, the reason why you would actually remove it in the first place is if you're whole roasting a chicken, when you go back later after the chicken is nice and roasted, it makes it a lot easier to carve and cut off that breast in one whole piece. So as you can see here, I've basically just released that wishbone. And now I'm going in with my fingers and I'm pulling it out. Now, if you're going to actually butcher a whole chicken, in the raw form, there's really no reason to remove that wishbone. It's just an extra step. But you need to be conscious that it's there. Now, you want to make sure you always have a nice, clean side towel to keep your cutting surface clean and to wipe down the bird as needed. You're going to flip the bird over onto its breast, and you're going to flex that wing forward as you cut back into that joint to release the wing. Again, you want to flex that wing forward and cut back behind that wing down and through the joint, nice and smooth, detaching that wing from the chicken. Now flip it over. You're going to spread those legs out a little bit so you can cut the flaps of skin that connect the legs to the rest of the chicken, and you're going to pop those thigh bones out of joint. Now the way that you're doing this is actually going to apply pressure with your fingers to where the thigh bone connects to the hip joint, and you're basically going to compound fracture or bend backwards that leg bone the way it's not supposed to go. Next, you want to cut down and then run your knife along the backbone, stopping at that joint, applying pressure to that joint while you pull up on the leg and thigh portion, which is going to release your oyster. Next, cut off that little flap of skin to detach the leg and thigh completely. Now again, you're going to cut down to the backbone, go up the backbone, stop at that joint, going to apply pressure downward with the knife blade as you pull up on the leg and thigh. Next, flip the chicken breast side up, and you want to find the breastbone that runs down the middle of the chicken between the two breasts. And you want to cut along that breastbone, and then continue to cut down along the rib cage and the cavity of the chicken to simply remove that breast from the chicken, always flexing your knife towards the bone. Remove the chicken tender because it cooks at a different rate as the other breast, and then go back and clean up your breast a little bit. Now again, from a bit of a different angle, we're going to cut on the other side of the breastbone this time. And again, you always want to make sure that you're flexing the cutting blade of your knife towards the bone. That way, if you miss or you make a wrong movement, you're going to just cut along that bone and you're not going to chunk the breast or the protein itself. Again, running that knife along that bone and then detaching that breast. I'm going to pull off that tender because it cooks at a different rate. Going to clean up any excess fat that's hanging off. And there I have my breasts, which completes the standard 6-part breakdown process. Now to turn this into an 8-part breakdown, simply detach the leg and thigh from each other. And it's just simply cutting down in between that joint. And you're going to just find that joint, cut directly through it. You shouldn't have to force or crush the bone at all. Now, if you want as well, you can also go back and make single winglets, again, by just cutting down through that joint, finding where that joint actually bends and articulates, and just come down straight through the joint. And if you're having a problem, you can always compound fracture it backwards to expose that joint even more. To properly prepare the chicken tender, you want to start by releasing a little bit of that tendon right there at the top that runs the length of the tender. And you want just enough of that tendon out so you can hold on to it. Because the next step is to flip it over, and using your knife, you're going to press it down along the cutting board, and you're going to scrape out that tendon. That just shows you how tough that tendon is, that even a sharp knife like that isn't going to really slice through it during a scraping motion. So it's important to make sure that you remove that tendon before serving that tender, because if you don't, it'll make your tender extremely chewy. For more butchery and knife skill techniques, check out stellaculinary.com/knife skills.